So, welcome to Grief Reflection, discussions on parental bereavement with Natalie Himmelrich and Carly Dudley. We want to say that we're sorry for your losses. Having said this, we want to encourage you to think that the reason why you're here and why we're together is not just only due to the losses, but because you're determined to walk the path of healing. And as we always do, Carly will welcome you as well and will say something about the candle.
Thank you, Natalie. It's always such an honour to be here with you, and welcome everyone. We've lit a candle just here to honour all the babies that have brought us together for this conversation, and we remember them always.
So today we're going to talk about the effect that loss has on our relationships, and specifically the intimate relationship. So thinking about you and the partner that you brought this child or baby into life and the challenges that you have been facing since the loss. Now, first of all, just what I always say to people asking me questions about the relationship is that relationships, A, are challenging with or without loss. Two, coming into parenthood, any relationship will become more challenging. I mean, that is a fact. Now, if this coming into parenthood is the first time with your first loss, then you also just come into being a parent, being a bereaved parent as well as a parent. So there is this identity that comes to that as well. So we were talking about our relationship challenges just before we started today. And I was sharing with Carly one of the things that has challenged my relationship with my husband the most, which was my emotionality. What I mean by that is the loss had a huge impact on the emotionality that I had to deal with, the sadness, the anger, and specifically for me, impatience. Impatience with myself of where I was and with an undermaid, a surviving twin we raised. And all of that has had me struggle. And one of the things I do, dealing with emotionality, if it gets overwhelming, I project. That's one of the ways we deal with that, some of us. So, and what that means is I try and get some kind of relief in the pain that I'm feeling, and I project that. That might be by finding some fault, or by blaming someone, and more often than not, this happens with the closest person, the person that we actually love the most. How has that been for you, Carly?
Yeah, I think the same with me. I sometimes wonder if like with Sam, not necessarily to do with anything to do with grief, but if I lash out at him, I would never lash out at anyone else in that way, and I kind of wonder if it's because I feel safe in letting that ugly side of me out to him, because I know he's going to love me through that, and he will accept whether he likes it or not. I mean, as if he would like that, but he will accept it and love me through that. And so I wonder if that's why I let that side of me out that I'm never proud of.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely the case. We let it out in the area and with the people that we feel safest with, and that they are usually the people closest, as I said, the people we love most, which is sad in its own way, because we love them and then we say hurtful things. As well, always, these things that we say that we're not proud of come out of the pain and the wounds that we have. That might be present wounds and pain, but also past. Because what happens in loss and with all other issues is that they resonate at a certain frequency, and they resonate with other old, unresolved past issues. Yeah. So whether that is a past loss doesn't mean that someone has died. It can be a relationship that has broken up, or your father or your mother never being present enough for you. It can be all kinds of things that are vibrating at the same energetical frequency as what you're expecting experiencing now. And as part of today, I asked Chris, my husband, what has been most challenging for you? And he really said something interesting. He said, I think the most challenging was the differences in self. So for him, he said it was getting used to his own different self, and that's what's called the new normal post-loss, and also getting used to the other. So the new normal partner, as I describe it in the book. And so we're 3 years post our loss, and he said we're still adjusting. I mean, I say that all the time. I'm still getting used to the way I experience things differently, the way I react differently, how I see the world with different eyes.
Yeah, I think that that's such a like an aha moment for me, because to think that we do, that person is also discovering their new self as well. And so, like for me personally, it would be, well, I can't really say that because I'm thinking in my head and then not saying it, and so it's coming out totally, and I'm tired. So, but you know, just the whole revelation of that we have to get used to this whole new person, and we might not like that new person. You know, and we're getting used to our new selves, and we're discovering new things and what we don't like, and we're focused on the past, and we want the past to be back in the present, and it's such an emotional roller coaster to be going through, and then to have the heaviness of real grief and sadness upon you, especially in early grief. It's just such a difficult thing to go through.
I think it was the most challenging for me to adapt to my new self, and the hardest thing for me was that I didn't have the choice of leaving that self. And I said to Chris, about 18 months post our loss, in a very dark moment, I said, you have the luxury to leave me. And I wouldn't have wanted to stay with me during many times. And I said to him, I don't have that luxury. I was really dark at that moment and tired of life. And in my case, and I want to speak about that because that is a reality for many bereaved parents who are listening to this, is the being tired of life and being suicidal or having suicidal thoughts. In my reality, in my experience, I had my mother commit suicide 4 months later after my child passed away. So I have that experience from a survivor point of view, and I knew the repercussion it would have for the family and so forth. And yet I was thinking, what's the point? What's the point? I was so in such things going through. I'll often ask myself, what's the point of being here? I was so tired, and I want to just normalize that this is normal.
Yeah, you're definitely not alone there. I mean, I don't know if I've had suicidal thoughts before, but there have been times in recent months where I've thought, wow, things would just be so much easier if I wasn't here. I wouldn't have to deal with this anxiety, or I wouldn't have to deal with this worry or pain, or so yeah, I think that feeling has been through most people's minds. But do you think, when you said that you had trouble adjusting to yourself, the way I see it is kind of like I'm always going to be evolving and changing, and I don't know if I'll ever be the same for a long period of time. I think we change so much, and not just through grief, but through personal discovery or different beliefs that we may have. Or
yeah, you speak a real truth. I mean, change is inevitable. Personal change, hopefully, is what's happening all our life. And there's a saying, can't remember who said it, but there's a test to know when you're done with your challenges and your tasks in life. As long as you're breathing, you're not. And so that is the reality. However, what happens with loss, it catapults you into such a big, different new self that is very jarring. And to sort of arrive there and find your footing and roots again is much more intense and sudden and often unexpected and unprecedented in terms of knowing what can happen. It is a big transition in life, more so than any other shifts in my life that I had. And I had signed up for grief very early on in life. I mean, I see that as part of my big themes in my life. Now, you, Carly, were sharing a little bit about the effects that Christian's death had on you in comparison to Sam. Would you mind saying a little bit about that?
Well, I think, well, to start off with, Sam and I are very, and always have been from the minute before Christian even died, but when we found out that he was had a fatal condition, and we were very, I'm not sure if it was because we were very young and in love and newlyweds, but we just had this sort of calm relationship, and it was just about, let's just love each other through this and let's accept each other for however we have to be. And so I can't really speak from a lot of experience about, you know, I'm upset because my partner didn't do this or doesn't do this, because I just have always accepted his way of grieving from the beginning. And he has the same with me. Like, the way I look at parenting Christian, parenting a child that has died is not a lesser experience as parenting a child that is here with you. It's just different. It's just a different experience that is equally as precious. And I know not everyone will agree with that. That's just my own personal view. And I'm not even sure that Sam feels that way, but he respects that, and so he allows me to spend time with Christian whatever I'm doing or whatever I'm focusing on, and he knows, he says, oh, she's spending time with Christian or whatever. So the things that were difficult, or should I say are difficult, is the effects that grief has had on me personally, and those effects have not been had on Sam. So for me personally, I suffer a lot of anxiety about my living children. I worry that they could die at any minute. They could go to school and fall off the playground, and then the next time it won't just be a broken arm, it'll be she's hit her head and she's died. You know, so I suffer a lot of anxiety about that, whereas Sam doesn't. And so I know grief, like the loss of my son, that's the only reason why I'm so worried all the time, is because I know that feeling, and I just couldn't possibly ever want to imagine having to go through that again with any of my other children. So that's difficult for us, because Sam doesn't worry. I mean, I'm sure he does to some extent, but he's a lot more rational, and he can see the odds of these happening are so small, and whereas I'm like, it's going to happen, you know. But that would probably be the main issue that we have together, and that's the way I personally handle my own fears and anxiety and worries.
Yeah. And I take two things from what you said. One is, for the people listening, is to ask yourself, where are you in the relationship at the time of loss? Because that will impact yourself and the relationship differently. Depends not on the amount of years, but where are you in yourself and in your relationship at the time. And the second thing is about the differences in grieving. And we spoke about this probably on previous grief reflections, that there is two main ways, according to the theorists. There's two main ways to grieve. One is the instrumental way of grieving and the intuitive way of grieving. Instrumental is traditionally more the male way of grieving. It's more cognitive, more about doing something, about being active. Intuitive grieving is more traditionally like the female way of grieving, emoting, talking about it, working through it, and a lot of emotions. And I say traditionally because it's not female grief like that and male grief like that. I have interviewed couples which were experiencing the other way, as it's gender specific typically. And I think these differences in grieving give a lot of potential for challenges in communication, in experiencing. Why are you not emoting? Why are you not talking about our child, our common themes that I hear from women specifically? And that is also due to the society's role that we have assigned the male with, one of them being taker. And energetically, when we're putting that out there, and if I've read the things about relationship on grief, Capture Your Grief project that you do, I saw a lot of women posting pictures of their men and affirming their support that they had. He was my rock, and that's all true. But we're also portraying that picture individually and as a society. So a man is called to be the support and the rock, and that's why also imagine if a man would be sobbing on the floor and couldn't be doing the normal task of the day, he wouldn't be able to be that support. So that also leads to the way that they're grieving, that the way that they're dealing with themselves. Besides that they might need different things, that's also the way that they have been over decades told or seen to be grieving. On television, that's what our kids see growing up. That's what they learn.
Yeah, I'm just sitting here taking it all in, Natalie.
And one of the topics that we spoke about, and I really want to mention that, is about intimacy and the making love. And that changes again during life and during the progression through relationship from period, which are the first 6 to 18 months, if you're really lucky, 3 years, when making love is really hot and interesting, to when it becomes more cool, how they term it in sexuality. So that changes anyway. But then parenthood has such an immense impact on each partner individually and as the couple. And again, loss. I remember one woman that I interviewed for the book, she said post-loss, she and her partner went away, and he said, you know, I just would love to be close to you, I would love to make love to you. And she just had given birth, and their son was, I think, stillborn. And she could not imagine anything nice in that, what her husband wanted, but she could understand what he wanted and what he would get from making love, what she didn't want to.
Yeah, my goodness, I can understand that. It's such a. I remember for me personally when this is not so much with Christian, but with our firstborn, Scarlett, and I had a very traumatic birth with Scarlett. It was a 36-hour labour, and she got stuck and she had to be vacuumed out. And so it was such a traumatic experience, to the point where I could not sit properly for about 5 months. And so, you know, the thought of being intimate at all was just too much for me to even think about, and it would literally bring tears to my eyes just thinking about it. And that's not even with a loss. So when you add that into it, it's very different for a male. Like, you know, my husband is so patient. But it is such a traumatic thing to go through. And I think what you were saying before about where you were in your relationship when your loss took place is really important. I mean, I get a lot of people that write to me saying, my husband won't do this and he doesn't care about this, and it all seems so terrible. And I just say, well, where were you before? What was your relationship like before your baby died? And it wasn't too much different. So two wrongs aren't going to make a right, I guess, in that respect. But sorry, I'm getting off the topic, aren't I?
No, you're not. And that reminds me of what you're saying, is because the script changes, the outlook that we have on the relationship changes post-loss. What I mean by that is the filter that we put on, the glasses that we look through are different. So post-loss, we have another set of glasses that we look through, which we could call the loss glasses. And so even though the relationship before might have been similar in terms of what has happened, the communication, the intimacy, making love, and so forth, suddenly we look at it through the glasses of loss. And because we've lost something that is both of ours, there is often an expectation, but you should be the person that understands me the most. This is our child. And yeah, it comes back to, in terms of the making love, what I wanted to add is the men feel love by being intimate in general. The women need to feel love or loved to be intimate.
We're quite opposite, aren't we?
If you see, it makes a lot of sense then. Okay, we are different. And again, if I'm speaking gender specific, it can also be the other way around. So don't quote me on saying, you said men do this and women do that. This is just generalization.
Everyone is different, that's true.
One of the topics that I think as well is really important is communication. A lot of questions come in relation to, I don't know if my husband really grieves. I don't know if he thinks about our baby or our child. And it's a common element in general in relationship that we assume a lot. This is a cardinal mistake, because we cannot assume anything. And the word assume, what it actually means, if you look at the word, it's making an ass out of you and me. Sorry for my language, but this is what it means, because assumptions are just that. It's just your mind thinking what the other person thinks, feels, and says. Unless you have spoken about it more than once, just a lie. You have no factual proof that this is how it is. And I'm saying more than once because every conversation is dependent on your state and on the situation. So if you're having this discussion and you're really emotional, you're really wounded, you're in a lot of pain, your conversation, your style of conversation will be different. You might say hurtful things you would otherwise never say. And that is because of the state that you're in. So taking all those things in and looking at your partner and say, well, what's the original reason why we are together? And one of the things asked often is it worth making this relationship work post-loss? And there is no easy answer.
I think I'm really glad that you brought that up, actually, even though I don't think we spoke about this before, but some relationships won't work. That's just the reality, isn't it? Not every relationship can be saved.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of pressure on, especially in this community, for people to not become a statistic. But I think, sometimes you have to be realistic about it and asking yourself, why are we together? What was the reason why we were together in the first place?
Yeah.
Such a huge, frightening question to ask.
Yeah, and in terms of answering that question, even though I said it's not an easy to answer, is I agree with you, some relationships are better apart. 2, I would say, in general, if there is no abuse and if you really care for each other, both, then there's a good reason to try and work it out. And that might be including getting support. In terms of the statistics, I want to say this again, it's really important. There's hearsay that says 70 to 80% of couples post-loss divorce. That is, according to the Compassionate Friends website, incorrect. Their latest research, and I can put a link there, it's also in my book, say that 10 to 15% of couples post-loss separate divorce, and that is lower than the general 50%. So
I'm so glad that you said that, because I remember we had this conversation, I don't know when it was, last week, and the amount of times I've seen that written where it's up to even 80%, and I thought, come on, like that can't be true.
yeah.
So,
I'll put that link when we post this video or underneath the video.
right.
It's not my research. It is posted on the website of Compassion Friends. And it takes out, it takes out that fear of, oh, it's going to happen to us.
Yeah. I think, we often look at other people's situations to work out how we're going to go, when really, something that I wanted to say was, we were talking about accepting each other's grief, and I think a lot of it has to do with respecting our differences as well, and taking a breath. It's about conversations, and taking a breath to think about what you're going to say and why you're saying it. Is it to hurt that person? Is it to make yourself feel better? Like what you said before about assumptions, and we can never assume what is going through somebody's mind or how that grief has affected them, because it will be different. We're all so different. It doesn't really matter, I don't think, if you're male or female individually. Like, I'm sure even between you and I, Natalie, we probably grieve differently in different ways for certain things. But I think it's about, just letting go of anger for, if you're angered or disappointed in the way your partner has or hasn't done something, maybe just taking a step back first, and maybe wondering why that is, or even asking. I think so often, I think I'm even guilty of this, is that I just expect Sam to read my mind. Like, why didn't he do that? And then when I look at it realistically, he can't read my mind. He has no idea what's going through my mind, and the odds of him actually knowing are very small. So, yeah, I think it's about communicating your needs and your feelings in a peaceful way.
Yeah. And also, from what you're saying, is that, if there is conversations where you're lashing out or where there has been hurtful comments, we said that before, probably, I think, it is to practice self-witnessing. What I mean by that is taking 5 to 10% of your awareness to watch what's going on, to reflect on what's happening. So just like a part of you saying, okay, what's been going on here? And you might not be able to do that in the heat of the moment, but do it afterwards. Don't guilt trip yourself by saying, I was really bad, or I shouldn't have said that. In the heat of the moment, and John Gottman, relationship expert, says, if your heart rate is higher than 100 beats per minute, then you're flooded with emotions. And then you're not making sense, you're not being rational, you're saying things that you otherwise wouldn't. So if you're noticing that, you're getting more heat in your body, then take time out.
Yeah, I think I was telling you about that in the conversation we had about self-forgiveness, and how I am learning to be a witness to myself.
Yeah.
And it's very, and that's something that I had to learn to forgive, is for my behaviours sometimes that I don't think are acceptable for myself. So yeah, being a witness to how I speak to Sam was a huge sort of awakening for me, because I could hear myself as I'm saying something, and as I'm saying it, I'm just, what am I doing? Why am I saying this? What am I getting out of this? It's very deep emotional work, but I think it's so worth it.
And yeah, so Carly's referring back to another grief reflection episode on forgiveness. So go back and watch that if you want to know more about forgiving yourself and forgiving others. And so in terms of relationship, I think to summarize this up, there's basically two questions that I think are really important. And before we ask, how has this loss affected our relationship? The first question is, how has this loss affected me? And using that question, or those two questions, as a way to reflect on the potential for working on that, accepting and working through that.
Yeah, and I think what we said, I think we were speaking about this earlier, and I think someone maybe asked, when will our relationship go back to what it was? And for me personally, I don't think that could ever be this cannot be reversed. There is no for me. There's no going back. There may be. That doesn't mean that there's not more beautiful and positive experiences and moments to come out of your new relationship. And for me, I think it's a lot. My relationship with my husband now is so much deeper and so much more rich with emotions, and not all of them are good. Our relationship is very human. But I think if you're always going to look back and be trying to hold on to what you had and want it to be reversed, it's just not going to happen. It's just not realistic. But that doesn't mean that you can't. It's just a different relationship now. It's not necessarily worse or even better. It's just different, and it's about adapting to the new normal and accepting it to some level.
Mm. So we want to know from you, how has your relationship been affected by the loss? How have you personally been affected that has then affected your relationship? And let us know. Let us know as a comment underneath this video or on the grievingparents.net page. And if you like this episode and you think it might help someone, send it to a friend or a family member and let them know that Grief Reflection is a regular program. And if you want more advice or support finding healthy ways to grieve, plus some personal insight, come over to grievingparents.net and have a look at the resources that are already there and increasing every day. So keep reflecting on your journey, because the world needs your story and insight to become better equipped at dealing with the challenges like grief and support and the grieving. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Natalie. Thank you, Rob, for joining us.